Hello, everyone. Tonight we are standing ankle-deep in cold mud, staring at something that should not be here. You've seen bones before, maybe in a museum, maybe in your soup, but never like this. In the middle of a wind-swept prehistoric basin, you're looking down at the skeleton of a mammoth, its massive tusks curling like ivory crescent moons. But nestled right between those tusks is something smaller, lighter, feathery, an owl's bones. And not just once, not just here. Over and over in burial sites spread across continents, researchers have unearthed something peculiar. The remains of owls beside elephantine giants. Not prey and predator, not dinner and diner, just side by side. As if keeping watch, as if they were expected. You lean closer. One of the owl skulls still has the hooked curve of its beak intact. It points toward the mammoth's brow like it's whispering something. You probably won't survive this journey not because of monsters or weather or poor snack choices, but because what you're going to hear tonight might make you question whether memory, ritual, and grief began with us at all. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. And let me know in the comments. Where are you watching from and what time is it for you? Now turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan for some soothing noise, and let's get started tonight. You kneel beside the bones, breathing slow so your presence doesn't feel like a threat then. The ancient dirt gives easily loam stirred by 1,000,000 years of weather. The mammoth's skull is still resting in profile, one tusk buried deeper than the other like it laid its head down to sleep and didn't rise. But there's something off. The owl's remains are unnervingly intact. Hollow bones like delicate pipework. Vertebrae aligned in a sleeping curve. No signs of predation. No impact trauma. Just placed there. As though the mammoth had gently set it down before dying. Or the owl perched and never left. Either version raises one very uncomfortable question. Who is watching who? A few steps away, the rest of the herd's tracks scatter in all directions, panic frozen into mud turned stone. But here, it's quiet. The way a stage is quiet before the first actor speaks. The mammoth's bones are surrounded by disturbed soil slightly darker, as though something paced here long after the others fled. And nearby a single desiccated feather, not fossilized, just ancient and dry, waits on a stone like a bookmark. Now, here's where things get weird. In modern elephant deaths, researchers have documented consistent mourning behaviors, touching the bones with trunks lingering for days, sometimes returning years later. That part is well established. But in some Pleistocene death sites, especially in northern Eurasia, the fossil arrangement shows a pattern owl bones in strange proximity to elephant remains. Historians still debate whether these were mere coincidences of scavenger roosting or signs of deeper ritual convergence. Because brace yourself. Many of these owls, they weren't scavengers. Their beaks show no wear from bone picking. Some were fish eaters, others silent flyers built for darkness, not carrion. One dig site in what's now the Siberian tundra revealed 3 mammoth calves in a row. Skeletons small and curled and perched at their heads like ancient nurses frozen in time were owl skeletons, each the same species, each facing the skull. Some archaeologists laughed it off as coincidence. Others whispered about the owl watchers theory. You, however, can't laugh. Not when you're here kneeling in the cold dirt watching an owl skull tilted, as if listening to your thoughts. Odd fact break. Here you go. Owls don't have eyeballs. Their eyes are tube-shaped and can't move. That's why they twist their heads like something out of a horror film. Fun at parties. Less fun when you realize those unblinking eyes may have stared at death for tens of thousands of years without flinching. You shuffle sideways. There's a deeper imprint near the owl bones, like something sat still there for hours. It isn't mammoth-shaped, it's not human. But it's definitely deliberate. A depression in the earth where wind didn't reach, shielded from the elements. You reach out to touch it and stop. Some part of you doesn't want to disturb the moment. The silence feels earned, like a performance that mustn't be interrupted by applause. Now, don't get me wrong, there's no fossilized note that says the owl taught us how to mourn. But here's what we do know. Many species learn from watching others. Crows learn funerary patterns from humans. Dolphins mimic mourning in response to dying peers, and elephants. They're sponges for memory, repetition, and ritual. So what happens when a species known for its silence, its stillness, and its ghost-colored presence lingers at every elephant death site for hundreds of generations? What if the owls were never there to feast? What if they were there to teach? You walk a little farther and find another cluster of bones, this time more disturbed. The mammoth's tusks are unevenly cracked, suggesting a fall. Its spine is bent at a sharp angle. A predator's work. Perhaps. But there, half buried in the shadow of a rootless tree, is a single owl feather. No owl bones this time, just the suggestion. And you know what they say about ghosts, you don't always need the body to feel the presence. Joke time. Because we're spiraling into owl-elephant death cult territory. I came here to watch mammoths die, not to be emotionally undone by bird skeletons. You'd think an owl would hoot at death. Turns out it just judges you silently. Mammoth funeral rites brought to you by one very concerned bird and several confused archaeologists. You straighten your back, feel the wind cut across your shoulder blades, and realize you're not alone. No animals, no humans. Just that feeling of being observed. Like the ground remembers you and something unseen has marked your presence. You're a visitor here. The guests of honor have been gone for millennia, but the ceremony continues. And in the center of that ceremony, there's always the same pair, the silent watcher and the one who chose to fall beneath its gaze. The first thing you hear is not wind. It's not bird song, not water, not even the shifting of leaves. It's nothing. Absolute pressing silence. You don't even notice you've stopped breathing until the air pinches your throat. Before you, a herd of mammoths files along a ridge, enormous shadows in the evening light. Their backs are furred with dust and age, and each step presses a memory into the earth. One of them stumbles, an older female maybe, and the others pause. Then from above, a whisper of feathers. You look up. There's a silhouette perched on the gnarled branch of a frostbitten tree. It doesn't move. Its head is rounded too large for its body. Its eyes seem to pull in the remaining light and keep it. That owl has been watching for a while. You crouch behind a crumbling slope and try to convince yourself it's normal. Birds perch. Mammoths migrate. But it doesn't feel normal. It feels organized, or worse, expected. The matriarch doesn't rise. Her knees fold like old scaffolding, and she rests her weight into the soil. The herd mills uneasily, forming a loose ring around her. One calf gently touches her tusk with its trunk. A male sways on his feet like he wants to trumpet but doesn't, and the owl still hasn't moved. You begin to notice a pattern not in the mammoths but in the spaces around them. High branches are occupied. Low rocks bear claw marks. Small depressions in the mud show where wide talons pressed. These aren't hunting spots, they're viewing spots. Across different herds, different valleys, and different eras, owls were seen present at mammoth death sites far more often than any other predator or scavenger. They didn't attack, they didn't scavenge, they simply watched. And the elephants didn't seem to mind. Historians still debate whether this was mutual tolerance ritual behavior or just some bizarre ecological fluke. But at least one camp believes something deeper was happening. They call them the Watchers of the Dying Herds. Sounds like a band name or a bad horror movie, but the data is unsettlingly consistent. Owls watch them die, not just once, over and over. You shift your weight and the twig beneath your heel snaps. The owl tilts its head in your direction, not startled, just taking you in like you're a minor development in an ancient play. The matriarch leans fully onto her side. The other mammoths back away slowly as if repelled by something sacred. Then the moment you weren't ready for, the owl glides down, silent ghost-like, a pale blur across the dusk. It lands near her head just out of reach. It doesn't peck, doesn't move. It just stands there motionless, staring into the massive brow of the fallen giant. You whisper, "Is this normal?" The owl does not answer, but the mammoths do. They do not flee. They do not challenge it. They simply stand still, chins low, forming a hushed elephantine amphitheater around this tiny feathered priest. We've seen similar behaviors in modern elephants. In Kenya, a researcher documented a herd pausing their migration for 3 days near the bones of a deceased female. Not scavenged bones, not fresh, just sun-bleached ivory and memory. One juvenile returned years later, placing leaves and dirt in a small pile beside the tusks. No obvious benefit, just grief. Odd fact: owls have asymmetrical ears, one higher than the other. It allows them to triangulate sound vertically. In the dead of night, an owl can hear exactly where your heartbeat is. So yes, if one was ever staring at you in the dark, it wasn't guessing. The mammoth herd begins to shift slowly, turning back to the trail but leaving a buffer zone around their fallen elder. The owl still hasn't moved. You wonder how long it will stay there. A few hours. Days forever. Some fossils suggest that even as the bones weathered and split, owl droppings accumulated nearby. Not randomly. In a fixed radius. As if they were roosting with intent, perched vigil. You rub your arms. The temperature drops quickly out here. Light bleeds from the sky and every ridgeline looks like the silhouette of a creature you can't name. As the herd moves on, the space around the owl and the corpse becomes unbearably still, like a bell jar pressed over the moment. And it's in that quiet that you hear it. A soft hoot. Not loud, not a cry, just a sound with no audience except the dead. Some researchers believe this behavior was practical owls following carrion for the small insects it attracted. But if that's true, why avoid feeding? Why arrive before death, not just after? Maybe it was symbiotic. Maybe it was behavioral mimicry, or the ghost residue of some extinct ritual neither side remembers. Or maybe, and here's where it gets delightfully uncomfortable, it wasn't about practicality at all. Maybe the owls came to feel something. You stretch out on a nearby slope, keeping your distance. The owl silhouette is barely visible now, but it hasn't left. You wonder if mammoths with their giant hearts and vast memories began to expect its arrival. Maybe they saw it as a sign. Maybe that still white figure meant permission to stop fighting, to fall without fear. Joke time. Because you need a break from this existential nature documentary. Turns out all this time, elephants were just waiting for their owl therapist to arrive. This herd's emotional support bird has logged more hours than my actual therapist. Nothing says it's okay to let go, like being stared at by a sentient feather duster. You lie back and stare up at the stars. There's no light pollution here, no cities, no headlights, not even fire. Just a sky full of things that don't care about you. Somewhere above, other owls fly in silence, their wings catching starlight like old silk. Somewhere below, mammoth bones settle into positions they'll keep for thousands of years. And beside them, watchers remain. You think of funerals today. Chairs, flowers, sunglasses to hide the eyes. And you wonder if we invented all of that or if we simply copied a ritual older than writing, passed down not in words but in looks and stillness. Because once a long time ago, the only witness to your last breath may not have been a god or a family member, or even another of your kind. It may have been an owl, waiting, quiet, and already halfway to understanding you. The thing about dying is, no one really knows where the line is. Not even you. Not even the ones watching. Especially not when you're one of the first elephants to ever hesitate. You're walking across a wind-scraped plain where the ice has receded just enough to show mudbone and the rusted green of moss trying its luck. You are not yet a mammoth, you're something older. Smaller. Not quite elephant, not quite ancestor. Your tusks are stubby, your spine awkward, and your gait lacks the somber weight that later generations will perfect. But even now, you're starting to notice something strange. One of your kin has fallen. They usually do sickness, broken legs, predators. Death happens quickly and everyone moves on. The herd continues. You always continue. That's the rule. But today you stop. You don't know why. Maybe it's the silence. Maybe it's the way the light catches on her collapsed flank. Or maybe it's the owl. There it is again. That pale blur standing just a few yards away still as carved soapstone. Watching. You glance at the others. Some keep walking. Others pause, sniff the air, shuffle their feet. But something in you folds. You approach the fallen one slowly. The owl doesn't move. You don't even know if it's real. It could be wind assembled, a trick of feathers and suggestion. But the closer you get, the more solid it becomes. Not mythical, not imagined. Just present. This is the moment historians have argued over for decades. Not this exact individual, you weren't famous, but this shift. Fossil records show that early proboscidans began leaving indentations in the ground near their dead. Not trampling, not scavenging, pausing, kneeling, leaning. For a species built on constant movement, stopping meant something, and it always happened near owl territory. Some paleontologists believe this was simple exhaustion. Others think the presence of trees or cover might have created natural resting points. But the patterns hold. Elephants began to wait near the dying, and the ones who paused were often seen in areas rich with roosting owls. The overlap isn't perfect. It doesn't need to be. Sometimes all it takes is one moment where the wrong two species stare at each other too long and suddenly something ancient is invented, like grief. You lower your head. The air smells of old water and the chemical breath of rotting grass. You touch her tusk just lightly. It's cold, but not empty. There's a pulse to it, not of life, but of memory. You feel it before you understand it. She isn't gone yet. Not entirely. And you're here for that. Across the plain, your herd keeps moving. One of them calls back a low sound, not quite a trumpet, not quite a sigh. You don't answer. Instead, you kneel. That might not seem like much, but for a creature of your size and skeletal structure, kneeling is dangerous. It means vulnerability. It means exposing your soft parts. It means, in short, risking empathy. And yet you do it. And the owl watches. Odd fact break. Owls have 3 eyelids. One for blinking, one for sleeping, and one thin translucent one that acts like a windshield wiper. So even when they're not looking, they're watching. In cultures across the world, owls are linked to death, wisdom, and secrets. In some Arctic mythologies, the owl was the keeper of breath itself, stealing the last one you exhaled. Today, though, this owl just looks tired, or reverent, or both. You sit beside the body longer than you should. The others are gone now. Even the scavengers haven't arrived. Just you and the owl and the way the sky slowly bruises into evening. This isn't instinct anymore, it's something else. Historians still debate whether this was the beginning of ritual or just proto-curiosity. Whether you paused because the owl taught you, or because something in your bones was always ready to pause and the owl just gave you permission. But the evidence grows from this period onward. More early elephant remains are found with signs of nearby visitation. Broken branches, scuffed soil, feather impressions, not from predators, from mourners. You finally stand creaking like an old tree. The air is cold again and your joints feel heavier. You don't know why you stayed, only that it felt correct. The owl lifts off in silence, no flapping, no farewell. You watch it glide toward a crooked pine where 2 others wait. A trio of shadows reunited in watching. Joke break. Because we've been kneeling in proto-elephant sadness for a while now. Imagine discovering grief and realizing there's no one to give you therapy except a bird with 0 emotional availability. First elephants to hesitate, still waiting for their slow poke medal. You try kneeling on a frozen plain with knees the size of tree trunks and not invent a spiritual crisis. You start walking again, not fast, not with the urgency you once had. You don't even rejoin the herd. You angle slightly away toward a ridge you haven't seen before. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's just a good place to rest. But the owl lands there just ahead of you, and you wonder, are they following you, or are you following them? You won't answer that question. No one will. But the rhythm has been set. Pause. Kneel, touch, wait, and always, always, witness. This is the beginning of something that won't be named for another 2 million years. Long before humans give it poetry or funeral homes, elephants will carry it silently in their muscle memory. And somewhere nearby an owl will be watching. You find them again years later, or maybe it's weeks. Time behaves oddly when you don't use calendars, only footsteps and fallen leaves. But there they are, a group of elephants not moving, not grazing, not trumpeting, just standing in a circle. You squint. They're gathered around something pale and massive, a body but not fresh, skin long gone. The bones have settled into the ground like furniture no one dared to move. And they're not just standing, they're doing something. A juvenile brushes its trunk in slow arcs across the exposed skull. Another lowers its head and leans gently into a shoulder blade. One steps backward, turns, then leans in again, forming a shape that's not random. A ring. You've never seen elephants behave like this, not in stampedes, not in migration. This isn't about survival, this is choreography. And then above them you spot it, an owl. Snow-colored, massive toss. It sits on a nearby outcrop like a sculpted guardian feathers puff slightly, as though the chill of the moment seeps into its bones too. You think it's the same one from before, but who's to say they all look ancient and disappointed? Historians call this the ritual phase. It's the point in the fossil record where elephant behavior begins to shift consistently around death. Not just pausing now, but repeating. Elephants are found circling the bones, revisiting specific sites, sometimes carrying small objects, branches, feathers, even stones, and dropping them gently near the skulls. One juvenile skull was found with smooth pebbles piled on either side of its jaw like bookends. No predator would do that. No wind pattern could explain it, and nearby, a fossilized owl feather. Delicately curled, as if placed there. It's at this point that human researchers start to panic a little. Because rituals aren't just behaviors, they're behaviors that remember themselves. They echo, they repeat, and that means intelligence, culture, even whispered emotion. You inch forward. The elephants don't notice you, or they don't care. This isn't your ceremony. You are a bystander, a tourist on sacred ground. They circle again. One of them lets out a low rumble, not distressed, not loud. It's almost harmonic. It vibrates your chest cavity more than your ears. The owl tilts its head but doesn't fly away. It just watches. And you realize something strange. They're not grieving loudly. They're grieving correctly. Joke break. Because this is getting dense and maybe a little too beautiful. I'm just saying, if elephants start holding memorial services with guest speakers, we're going to need to rework the food chain hierarchy. Turns out elephants are the friend who brings flowers to your grave every year and never tells anyone. The owl's just waiting to give a eulogy in Morse code. Probably already has a little black feather suit. Back to the circle. One of the elephants steps outside the ring, scoops up a feather with its trunk, an owl feather maybe, and holds it for a moment before placing it across the brow of the skull. You gasp, but softly. Not because it's dramatic, but because it looks intentional. It's not dropped or flung or stomped. It's placed, with purpose. Historians still debate whether this was mimicry copying the birds they always saw perched nearby, or whether this was shared territory transformed into shared meaning. You know what they're really afraid of? That elephants understood. That they recognized the watcher and incorporated it into their ceremony. You want to say it's projection. That you're imagining all of this. That a rock is just a rock. that a feather is just there by accident. But you've seen too many coincidences now. Too many owl bones nestled next to tusks. Too many smooth stones where there should be none. There's a theory whispered more than published that the owl served as an emotional primer. That its stillness gave elephants a model for what grief looked like. Not loud, not desperate, just present, watching without fleeing, standing without explanation. Odd fact, there's a documented case of a captive elephant in South Korea who, after the death of its companion, turned away from food for days, then began visiting the spot daily, collecting sticks and placing them in a consistent pattern. No owls were present, but it didn't matter. The ritual had survived. You back away from the circle. Slowly, quietly. Your own breath becomes part of the silence, your footsteps part of the rhythm. You feel like you're watching the dress rehearsal for a kind of consciousness you don't belong to. One that doesn't need language. One that doesn't need God. Just space, stillness, and something to gather around. The owl flies off at last, not urgently, just enough to let you know the scene is complete. And as it disappears into the dim branches, you realize the elephants are leaving too. One by one in slow, deliberate steps. Not all together. Some pause again. One lingers behind trunk, brushing once more against the tusk, then follows. And you're alone again except for the bones. You approach the skull. The feather is still there. Its shaft angled just so, like a signature. The pebble still nestled where the jaw once held laughter or warning or song. You sit beside it. You don't speak. There's no one to talk to, only someone to remember. The owl returns the next year. You don't know how you recognize it, maybe the slightly bent talon or the way its head tilts with theatrical disdain, like it's already disappointed in what the season has to offer. But it's the same one. You'd bet your last fire-starting stick on it. Same perch, same time, same unblinking stare into a place where something once died. And here's the thing. No mammoths have fallen here this year. The bones are long gone, scattered by frost-heaved scavengers in time. But the owl comes back anyway. It lands in the hollow left behind by the rib cage. The soil's been depressed by years of visitation. And there, without any ceremony or hesitation, it sits. Just like it did the first time. Just like it's been expected to. You feel like you're watching someone visit a grave. This isn't a fluke. Not anymore. Across several sites, owl roosting behavior shows seasonal regularity, returning to locations where large herbivores had died years earlier, long after there's any scent food or immediate interest. Just presence. You hunker down behind a stunted pine, hands pressed into cold lichen. The sky is clear, but the air tastes like frozen iron. The owl does not seem to notice, or perhaps it does, but considers the discomfort part of the process. A mammoth herd shuffles in the far distance. You hear the slow percussion of their feet long before you see them, but they don't come close. Not this time. Their path skirts the ridge entirely, as if honoring a space they no longer need to occupy. And still the owl waits. Historians still debate whether this is learned memory or inherited instinct. Whether owls pass down these death spot returns through genetic behavior, or if a single owl simply learned its way into history. Either way, it looks like devotion. Odd fact time. Some species of owl can live over 25 years in the wild. That's longer than many ancient human lifespans. It's entirely possible that the owl you're watching now has seen more deaths than you ever will, and it hasn't changed the way it behaves. You creep a little closer. Not enough to intrude, just enough to feel the temperature difference where the ground remembers warmth that's no longer there. Something once lay here, something big, breathing, burdened. The owl stands at its center like a punctuation mark on a sentence no one ever got to finish. And then you swear this is real. It fluffs its feathers, not randomly, not for warmth, it's deliberate. A quick ruffle followed by utter stillness again, like a gesture, a bow maybe, a shrug, maybe even a sigh. You can't help yourself. You whisper, "You doing okay?" It doesn't answer. Of course it doesn't. That's not its job. Its job is to return. And maybe that's all memory really is, returning to something that no longer exists and doing it anyway. You wonder if the mammoths noticed. If the herd ever looked back and said, "Hey, weird, that the bird keeps coming back to Grandma's spot every year." Maybe they didn't think about it at all. Maybe they just followed suit. The first time a mammoth revisited a death site wasn't documented in stone or art, but their tracks say enough. There's a layer of compacted soil that shows 3 different return visits each years apart, each marked by the presence of owl pellets. Not food, not nest, just presence, just witness. The word that keeps rolling around your brain is fidelity, which, to be fair, is a weird thing to project onto an animal with a rotating neck and no sense of facial expression. But there's something sacred about the repetition. Joke break. Because your bones are cold and the owl's not going to crack a smile. At this point, I'm 80% sure the owl is unionized and clocking in for its annual grief shift. Imagine being so good at mourning that another species starts copying you. Pretty soon, elephants are going to start asking, "What would owl do?" Bracelets. You sit with it for a long time, longer than you mean to, and you realize that in a strange way you've started copying it too. You're not researching. You're not scavenging, you're not even particularly warm. You're just here, watching, remembering, participating in the theater of something ancient and quiet. The owl eventually lifts its head, not with drama, just a slow blinking shift of attention. Its wings open, feather tips brushing softly against the dried grass. It leaves the ground as if it were never part of it. It doesn't fly far, just to a new perch. A crooked limb at the edge of the clearing where the shadows lie thicker and the cold settles deeper. You follow with your eyes but don't rise, because this is your place now too. Historians argue endlessly about what qualifies as ritual, repeated behavior, intentional design, cultural significance. And when it comes to animals, they tie themselves in knots, trying to avoid anthropomorphism, projecting human emotions onto non-human acts. But here's the thing. Maybe it's not projection if it wasn't ours first. Maybe ritual didn't begin with language. Maybe it began with quiet. The owl blinks one more time. Its feathers shift. And once again, it becomes still. And once again, the elephants far across the plain begin to slow down. You can almost hear the rhythm now. A pattern that has no drum. A song that has no voice. But it's there, beneath the snow, beneath the bones. And every year a bird comes back to remember. There's no sound like it, not thunder, not a hunting roar, not even the eerie crack of glacier ice breaking in the night. It's the sound of a mammoth calf, freezing in place under moonlight. You're there when it happens. Not directly in the path, just off to the side, hidden in the brush, with your heartbeat crawling up your throat. The calf had been chasing fireflies. Yes, really. Bumbling behind them in that unsteady toddler way, trunk flailing, knees uncertain. And then stillness. The shadow above doesn't move. It has wings, not flapping, not descending, just stretched out between 2 dead trees like a veil of feather and fear. The moon is full and low tonight, brushing everything in ghost light. And the owl, if that's what it is, looks enormous. Too enormous. Maybe it's the angle. Maybe it's the way moonlight plays tricks on your depth perception. But it hangs there, wings extended, not quite flying, not quite perching. Just suspended. And the mammoth calf does not move a muscle. You don't either. You've never felt the air go flat like this before. Even the wind stops. Every cricket, every insect, every distant whisper of mammoth hooves gone. As if the sound has dropped into a hole and can't get back out. Then you realize what's happening. The shadow isn't just a bird. It's a shape, a gesture. And the calf is responding to it like it's been trained. No one taught it this. There are no elephant schools offering introduction to owl theology, but the calf doesn't shake, doesn't cry, doesn't even blink. It just lowers its head slightly and waits. Historians still debate whether elephants have inherited visual triggers, instinctive responses to certain silhouettes, perhaps from ancient predators' pressure. But this This isn't fear. This is reverence. Odd fact. Moonlight is about 400,000 times dimmer than sunlight, but the eyes of certain owls can detect contrast in it with ridiculous precision. It's believed some species can hunt by the motion of shadows alone. That same ability also gives them an uncanny gift being visible in stillness when nothing else is. The owl finally moves, not toward the calf, not away, just upward. The wings fold back into its body and it melts into the trunk of a broken tree. Gone. Not flying off, just disappearing, like breath into bark. The calf exhales almost inaudibly. You do too. And now the moment's passed, but the memory of the shape remains burned into the clearing. Even the trees seem to lean slightly inward like they want to speak but know better. You creep forward. The calf has begun to nudge the soil with its trunk. Not digging, not foraging, just pressing. It walks a small circle and pauses at what you recognize as an old death site. The bones aren't visible anymore, but the earth is sunken, and the lichen refuses to grow in a perfect oval. And then, because apparently you don't get to leave this night feeling normal, the calf picks up a stick. A stick, just a little one. It carries it to the center of the clearing and drops it gently, then steps back. And sits. You are not hallucinating. You are watching a mammoth calf perform a silent offering to a place where something once died under a shape it's never been taught to fear, but has somehow learned to honor. Joke time, because otherwise your soul might float out of your mouth. This baby elephant is more emotionally mature than anyone I dated in college. Someone get this calf a tiny candle and a tiny couch, it's processing. The owl's probably in the tree going, look at this kid. Nailed the ritual. 10 out of 10. You sit beside the scene for what feels like hours. Not moving, not talking, just tracing the outlines of a myth too old to be written. The moon drifts across the sky in that slow, judgmental way, and you feel every second of it. And then your breath catches. More calves, just two, slightly older. They step into the clearing and pause. One lifts its trunk toward the tree line, sniffing. The other eyes the stick in the dirt like it's encountered art for the first time, and isn't sure whether to feel something or step over it. Then they join. No instruction, no cue. They simply take up positions on either side of the sitting calf and lower their heads. The shadow returns. Not as large now, maybe it's just perspective, but it glides across the ground like spilled ink. It doesn't land, doesn't linger, just passes over the clearing and fades into the hill. Historians have traced similar behavior in modern elephant calves. In sanctuaries, young ones are often seen mimicking the movements of adults during grief, standing still, touching objects, even swaying gently. But here's the twist: in those cases, they've seen it before. Tonight's calves haven't, which means the ritual isn't just copied. It might be remembered. The calf who started it finally rises. Its legs are wobbly, but it walks with quiet assurance out of the circle. The stick remains where it was placed. You stand to, knees stiff and heartbeat rattled. You look up at the tree where the owl first perched. Empty. Or maybe not. Maybe it's never really left. The shape of the wings. The hush of the clearing. The exactness of the stillness. These things outlast feathers. They imprint themselves on breath, on posture, on the way a calf pauses just slightly longer before stepping over a patch of ground where bones once lay. Maybe, just maybe, the owl taught elephants a wordless language, a shape made of moonlight and memory. And they remembered. You wouldn't have noticed it at first, not unless you'd already seen it happen 20, maybe 30 times. But now you can't unsee it. The owl does not move. It lands. It perches. It breathes. But when death arrives, it becomes a sculpture, a hushed punctuation mark in the dark, a comma between moments. And somewhere along the way, elephants started doing the same. You watch from a rise above the valley. One of the old bulls is limping too many winters, too many miles, maybe a fight he didn't win. His tusks hang unevenly, one scraping a groove into the dirt with every step. The herd has slowed, but only slightly. because they know it's happening. And so do the owls. The slope is scattered with them tonight. Not clustered, not chattering, just there. Two on a crooked birch, one sitting directly on a flat stone like a priest waiting for his congregation to arrive. You count at least 7, maybe more hidden in the tree line. No calls, no hoots, just feathers and patience. The bull stops walking. He lowers himself slowly, not collapsing but settling, as though the ground had already offered its embrace. And then, it begins. The rest of the herd freezes, not in fear, in something else, stillness. One by one they stop chewing, stop swaying, stop breathing loudly. They just stand. And the owl still. You're witnessing something impossible. A multi-species ritual with no organizer, no book, no spoken agreement. Just a silence so deep, it presses against your skin. You remember the first time you saw an owl do this, how it refused to move even as a predator prowled beneath it. How it simply became part of the air, not resisting, not escaping, witnessing. Now the elephants do the same. No circling, no touching, just presence. And it's not a one-time event. It happens again and again. Each time a mammoth mastodon or ancient cousin lies down for the last time, the owls arrive, and so does the stillness. Historians still debate whether this was the result of environmental cues, wine temperature, herd behavior, or whether the owls truly predicted death. But in 14 different fossil sites, bones of large proboscideans are found, accompanied by owl remains, owl droppings, or bizarrely owl-shaped impressions in sediment with no owl bones at all. Like ghosts, like shadows that forgot to fade. Odd fact: owls have special wing structures that disrupt air turbulence, making their flight almost completely silent. Not just quiet, inaudible. Scientists used high-speed microphones and heard nothing. That's how good they are at not being heard. And now elephants seem to have taken a page from the same handbook. You crawl closer through the brush. The ground is damp, mossy, padded by generations of fallen needles. Each footstep feels like a violation. This entire place hums with reverence. You pause behind a tree and watch. The bull lifts his head slightly. An owl shifts its weight. Nothing else happens. But the feeling, that's different. This doesn't feel like mourning, it feels like obedience. The herd is holding a vigil. And the owl. The owl is teaching by not teaching. Joke break. Because this is either the most poetic wildlife observation of your life, or you're about to be recruited into a cross-species death cult. The owls are like, we're not saying we're grief consultants, but we do charge by the hour. Elephants copying owls, copying elephants. It's grief, but make it interpretive dance. At this point, even the squirrels are like, should we be standing still too? You think of your own species, the ones who fill silence with words, who speak at funerals not to honor the dead, but to soothe the living. And you realize something painful. This is quieter than any funeral you've ever known. You close your eyes. You try to match the stillness, to not shift your weight, to not scratch your nose, to simply be present. It's harder than it looks. And you feel something deep inside your ribs fighting against it, the very human urge to do something. But the owl has already taught them what to do. Stillness is the something. Stillness is the ritual. The bull exhales once. A long, low rumble that you don't hear so much as feel beneath your fingernails. Then nothing. The herd remains motionless. The owls do not blink. Even the wind forgets to rustle the grass. You don't know how long you sit there. Could be minutes, could be hours. Time drips differently when everyone refuses to mark it. Eventually, the herd shifts. One elephant turns, then another. They don't look at the bull. They don't trumpet. They don't cry. They leave. And the owl, it stays, just for a little while longer. It hops down not with a drama, but like a janitor staying after the party's ended. It walks a short loop around the bull's head, then perches back on its stone, and finally, it flies away. You wait until dawn before approaching. The ground where the herd stood is flattened yet undisturbed. No claw marks, no scuffle, just a wide circular print of peace. and in the center the bull's body already sinking into the earth. You kneel, though you don't know why. Maybe it's instinct. Or maybe you've just learned how to grieve by watching others do it better. You're watching from the thicket as a young female mammoth approaches a weathered skull, one that's clearly been there for a few seasons. The bone is smoothed by rain lichen brushing its jaw like shy fingers. It should mean nothing anymore. Should be part of the landscape. But this female, this gentle, wrinkled rectangle of a creature walks toward it like it's alive. In her trunk, a feather. And not just any feather. You know it the second you see the curve, the pale edge, the almost translucent texture. It's owl? Maybe not from the same owl that watched this elephant die. Maybe not even from this region. But that doesn't seem to matter. She lays it carefully across the ridge of the skull, then steps back and just waits. This is new, not the waiting that's old by now. You've seen elephants stand motionless for hours. You've seen calves freeze under owl shadows. But this gesture, this gift, that's different. And it's not just feathers. You've seen a male bring a half-eaten fruit and place it beside a tibia. You've watched another arrange twigs in a tidy fan pattern beside a fallen rib cage. None of it is useful. None of it is food. None of it keeps predators away or helps anyone survive. It's mimicry. Or it's something more unsettling. Memory. Historians still debate whether these offerings are acts of symbolism or mere behavioral echoes. One camp calls it anthropomorphic nonsense, insisting that these are random gestures made meaningful by our desperate human need for narrative. The other camp, they're quieter. They just keep pointing to the same footage, the same fossil sites, the same repeating shapes. It's getting harder to write it off. Odd fact. Elephants have more neurons in their cerebral cortex than humans, more than any other land animal. That doesn't necessarily mean they're smarter, but it does mean their brains are wired for depth, for emotion, for subtlety, for rituals maybe, for grief, or for mimicry that became meaning. You trail the young female as she walks away from the skull. She's not in a hurry. Her tail sways in the breeze. Behind her, the feather lifts slightly in the wind, then settles again like it's tucking itself in. She didn't drop it. She placed it. And she didn't look at the owl who watched her do it, but the owl was there. High in a stone crevice, head cocked unblinking. It didn't move, didn't call, didn't react. It just saw. You begin to suspect that seeing has become part of the ritual, too. You hike toward the next ridge where another death site waits. This one older, bones half sunken, a pelvis shaped like a collapsed satellite dish, and scattered all around it. More feathers, more twigs, a pile of rotting fruit in a little crescent shape. None of this is coincidence. Joke time, because you're starting to feel like a very sad museum exhibit. Elephants invent grief art. Next up, interpretive dance and overpriced coffee. They're making little altars. This isn't mourning, it's prehistoric Pinterest. If a mammoth starts playing the flute next to a skeleton, I'm out. But you're not out. You're hooked. Because now you've started seeing patterns where you used to see mess. The feathers aren't randomly placed, they cluster around heads. The fruit tends to go near the chest. The twigs always near the feet. It's not symmetrical, it's not always consistent, but it suggests. And suggesting is the beginning of language, of meaning, of ritual. You settle in for the night near one of the more recent sites. A small herd has bedded down nearby. One of the old bulls is missing, gone this morning, probably fallen in a hidden gully or taken by illness. The others know. You can see it in how they breathe, how their trunks move slower, how their bodies face a direction they refuse to go. An owl arrives just after dusk. No ceremony, no noise, just a soft shape appearing on a boulder like an idea someone forgot to finish. The calves stare at it. You're expecting stillness, but that's not what happens this time. One of the calves steps toward it and drops something small, a feather, too short to be owl. Maybe a ground bird or even something scavenged from the fur of another. But again, it doesn't matter. What matters is that the calf brought it, offered it, then turned and rejoined the herd. And the owl still doesn't move. You whisper under your breath, is it teaching them, or are they teaching themselves? There's a theory, quiet, unpublished, passed around between field notes and late-night emails, that the elephants are inventing these gestures not to please the owls, but because of what the owl represents: presence. A creature that does not flinch, that watches without reacting, that stands sentinel at the border between life and what comes after, that doesn't leave. You've never been religious, but tonight, watching the elephant calves walk slowly past the boulder, each glancing once at the perched silhouette above each, pausing before bed, you begin to understand why people kneel. Not because they're told to, because something quiet inside them needs to. The owl finally flies off. The sky is heavy with stars, and the mammoths sleep in a half-circle that opens toward the ridge where the bones are buried. You lie down beside a cold tree root and close your eyes. When you sleep, you dream of feathers falling like snow and giant creatures collecting them in silence. It wasn't the bones that alarmed you. It was the way they were arranged. You've been wandering the basin for a few days now, following the strange migratory rhythms of this scattered mammoth herd and the owls that appear to stalk not with hunger but with history. Today, you crest a low ridge, expecting nothing more than wind and frost, and instead, you find it. A skeleton, mostly intact. But something's wrong. The skull faces east. Unusual, but not impossible. One tusk buried the other, arcing up like a question mark. Still believable, but then your eyes trace the bones further. The ribs have been nudged inward, not broken, not scattered, just tucked, like a blanket pulled back. The legs are aligned, not by current or scavengers. You've seen what that looks like. Random. Violent. No, these are placed like rails, like the mammoth laid down in perfect symmetry and was helped to stay that way. And around it, 12 stones, smooth, similar in size, placed in a ring, not a perfect circle but too orderly for accident. You freeze, because there are no human footprints here, and no tools, no charcoal, no carvings. But there are faint, shallow depressions leading away from the site, three-toed, bird-shaped. You crouch and reach out to touch the nearest stone. It's not heavy, fits in your palm, smoothed by water and time. But there are no rivers here. You look around trying to trace where they could have come from, and then you spot it. A ledge 100 meters away, a cliffside roost, a place where owls have nested for generations, judging by the white flecks and feathers clinging to the rock. You whisper to yourself, no way, but your hand is already shaking. Historians still debate whether bones were ever purposefully rearranged by non-human animals. Most agree it's rare, if not impossible, outside of nesting behavior or food caching. But sites like this, sites with symmetrical placement, repetitive stone patterns, and no clear predator evidence, they're rewriting the margins of those textbooks, quietly, uneasily. Odd fact. Some owls have been observed collecting non-food items, bits of cloth, bones, even plastic, in modern environments and arranging them in simple, repeated patterns near their nests. Not functional, not for mating, just decoration or memory. You walk the circle slowly. The stones hum beneath your boots, not literally, but with that strange pressure you get in places that remember. You count the bones. You count the stones. 12 of each, 12 vertebrae visible, 12 pebbles around the skull, and under one stone, just barely wedged beneath it, a feather. You don't touch it, because you've started to feel like you shouldn't. Joke break, or else your thoughts are going to start arranging themselves into spirals. If elephants start building Stonehenge around their dead, I'm calling Animal Planet with a documentary pitch. 12 stones, 12 bones. This is either grief or the most depressing scavenger hunt ever. Somewhere there's an owl with a tiny clipboard going, no, the stones need to be clockwise, guys. Back to the scene. You sit just outside the circle, keeping your body out of the arrangement, like you're afraid to scuff the sacred geometry. You're not sure who built it. Was it the herd? Did they bring the stones, dragging them one by one with their trunks? Or did the owl? You glance toward the ledge again, still perched, still watching. But this one's different. Bigger. Older, maybe. Its wings look frayed. One eye reflects the sunlight in a way that feels intentional. You think of the first time a calf laid a feather on a skull, the first time a mother elephant returned to the place where she gave birth and where her own mother had died, the first time an owl circled twice instead of once. And you wonder, what if that behavior wasn't random? What if the bones were a canvas? And these gestures, the placements, the gifts, the stones, they weren't learned through punishment or reward, but through feeling. Maybe elephants don't bury their dead because of logic. Maybe they just can't bear to leave chaos behind. And owls? Maybe they stay because silence for them is more than instinct. It's inheritance. You lie down beside the ring and let the cold earth press against your shoulder blades. The bones creak gently in the wind, shifting just slightly as if adjusting for comfort. You close your eyes and listen. There are no footsteps, no branches breaking, no snorts or distant trumpets, just the soft, measured rustle of feathers, and a single stone sliding almost imperceptibly into place. At first, you assume it's human. You're standing at this edge of a clearing, blinking in disbelief. In the center, an elephant skull, broad-bleached, cracked like old pottery. Around it, stones, not scattered, not tumbled by glacial runoff or avalanche. No, these are placed perfectly, a ring, symmetrical, equidistant, the kind of thing you expect to see in ancient temples, crop circles, or the disappointing climax of a found-footage horror movie. So you do the thing that humans do when faced with mystery. You look for yourself. You circle wide, scanning the ground for footprints. Surely someone came through here, some early Homo sapiens teenager trying out sacred geometry and performance art. But there's nothing, not a single human impression in the soil. No tool marks, no dragging patterns, no cigarette butts. And that's when your stomach shifts. Because the only other prints are clawed. 3 toes, bird-shaped. You drop to your knees like you've just heard a sermon you didn't understand but felt anyway. You press your fingers into the nearest depression. It's shallow but clear. The claws are long, sharp, not raptor prints, not turkey vultures, and too wide for a hawk. But owls, specifically giant owls, they fit. Now, you remember what one researcher whispered in a dimly lit bar, half joking but eyes too serious. If we ever find a ring of stones and the only footprints are avian, we're not the first ritualists on this planet. You laughed at the time. You're not laughing now. The stones are smooth, water-worn, and clearly transported. This isn't a local rockfall, and there are 21 of them arranged in a pattern that's difficult to explain. Not a perfect circle. More of a spiral caught mid-turn, like something meant to begin but frozen in a moment of hesitation. Historians still debate whether non-human animals can understand spatial symbolism, but this makes debate feel ridiculous. Because even if it's not conscious symbolism, it's deliberate pattern. Odd fact. Some owl species, particularly burrowing owls, have been observed decorating their nests with bones, dung, and even man-made debris. Not functional, just placed, repeatedly. Some of these objects are aligned with striking precision. Scientists usually chalk this up to instinctual behavior, but even they admit they don't know why. You look up, no owls in sight, but they've been here. You feel it in the hush. In the way the air has texture, like it's wrapped around you instead of passing through. You feel it in your neck, a tickle of being watched. And then from the tree line, something shifts. Not a hoot, not a wing beat, just the kind of silence that's only noticeable when it ends. An owl lands on the far side of the circle, white, broad-winged. It doesn't move toward the skull, just watches, head tilted slightly. If you move, it doesn't flinch. If you speak, it won't answer. But when you blink, it's suddenly closer, still outside the ring, but near enough now that you can see a nick in its beak. A scar across one talon, the soft ripple of feathers moving in time with breath. And then this is the part that will haunt you. It walks. Not hops, walks. One slow step around the ring, then another, never entering, always following the path of the stones. It knows the pattern. It's repeating it. You sink into the grass like your joints have given out. Not in fear, in reverence. You are watching a ritual you were never meant to understand and certainly not meant to interrupt. Joke break, because you're getting a little too close to starting your own owl cult. Pretty soon, the owls are going to start charging admission to these funerals. Circle of stones. Avian footprints. This is either a ritual or a very dedicated bird-themed escape room. Somewhere, a mammoth ghost is going. Finally, someone appreciates my posthumous interior decorating. The owl pauses at the northernmost point of the circle, then turns, faces the skull, and bows. Onsu, once. It's so fast you think you imagined it, but the motion is there. A deliberate dip of the head, a lowering of the gaze. And then it lifts off not with urgency, but with that same impossible silence you've come to dread. Like sound itself respects the act. You crawl forward once the bird is gone, and you notice something else. The stones aren't the only thing placed with care. There are small indentations in the soil around the skull. Smoothed, not stomped. Worn down by heavy padded feet. Elephant feet. You're not the first to kneel here. Others did too. Massive wrinkled four-legged creatures who stood in this circle and said nothing and did nothing except be here. And before them, or after, or with them, owls. This was not a grave. This was a gathering. You sit back and let the sky wash over you. The trees sway. The stars peek through. Somewhere an owl will return. Somewhere else an elephant will lay down for the last time. And in the in-between, there will always be circles of stones, of watchers, of memory. You've entered the forest with no echo. At first, you think your ears are playing tricks on you. Maybe the cold has muffled your hearing. Maybe the moss is just thick enough to swallow the sound of your own boots. But then you try it, clapping your hands softly together the way you'd test a cave or a tunnel. Nothing. No reverberation. The sound just disappears. You mutter something under your breath, and even that vanishes before it can reach the leaves. You are deep in it now. Deeper than you should be. The trees are wrong here, tall and pale, their trunks smooth as bone, no bark to break the silence. Their branches hang low and inward, as if listening, as if pressing the air downward into the soil. Even the light seems to curve, strangely caught in a green haze that refuses to reflect. And still no echo. You've heard of this place before, or at least a place like this. Whispered about in expedition journals written off by respectable scholars. An auditory anomaly, possibly geological, but the locals you remember never walk here at dusk, because the owls do. You don't see them at first, but you feel them. That same pressure you've come to associate with observation, the too-even hush, the itchy sense that something just turned its head. And then you spot the first one. Perched on a horizontal branch like a half-forgotten thought. White, massive, watching. You wave a hand, no response. You break a stick beneath your foot, no crack, no snap. Just motion, no sound. And under that branch, half buried in the lichen, are elephant bones. A full rib cage, tusk fragments, vertebrae that seem to lean toward each other like dancers caught in an embrace. This is not where elephants die. This is where they return to. Historians still debate whether these acoustic dead zones were naturally occurring or artificially enhanced some kind of ancient forest behavior altered by generations of trampling, roosting, and ceremony. But the effect is undeniable. Sound dies here. And somehow, that absence has become a kind of invitation. You step softly forward. The ground is spongy, blanketed with a carpet of moss so dense it resists your weight. The bones are undisturbed. No predator marks. No signs of struggle. But arranged as always with care. One leg bone has a stone resting on it. Another is wrapped loosely in a crumbling vine, probably placed there when it was still green and living. And perched nearby, 3 more owls. None of them move. None of them blink. It's like entering a museum curated by silence. Odd fact. Some owl species can rotate their heads 270 degrees, not because they're creepy little horror puppets though, yes, but because they have extra neck vertebrae and special blood vessel systems that prevent damage when twisting. It makes them better at scanning their surroundings without moving their bodies. Perfect for guardians. Perfect for witnesses. You're close enough now to touch the skull, but you don't. Because something about this space makes you feel like you're inside a held breath. The forest doesn't want sound, and you've started to understand why. Stillness here means something. You back away, slowly, step by step retracing your path toward the tree's edge. As you leave, you notice something else, something easy to miss the first time around. There are paths, thin trails of compressed moss and sunken loam, too wide for owls. Too deliberate for deer. They're elephant trails, old ones, worn smooth by decades of quiet feet, leading to the circle of bones and never beyond. You think of the elephants who died elsewhere on plains in snow on cliffside paths, and how sometimes years later their herd mates returned not to where they died, but to here, to this forest, to this soft void of sound. And when they arrived, they carried things, a piece of bark, a fallen feather, a memory. Joke time, because otherwise you're going to weep into the moss and call it a religious experience. No echo, no problem. Just you, the owls, and your thoughts spiraling in perfect silence. Even sound knows better than to interrupt an owl funeral. This forest has the vibe of a library run by birds with tenure and zero patience. You make it back to the edge. Step onto gravel. The moment you cross the threshold, sound returns. Crunch wind, your own breathing, all of it rushing back like someone hit on mute. And it hurts, just a little. Because you hadn't realized how loud you are, how clumsy and sharp your presence sounds outside that stillness. You look back. The owls haven't followed. Neither have the elephants. But they will. They always do. The dead might fall anywhere, but the ritual always returns here. To the place where Avon's sound lays down its head. To the forest with no echo. You reach the edge of a cliff where the air changes. Not the temperature, not the smell, the weight. You can't explain it any other way. It feels denser here. Like the atmosphere is tired. Like history hangs from the wind itself, dragging it lower, slower. And below in the valley, trees like shattered ribs, open, hollowed, no leaves, just bare shapes holding stories. This is where the questions begin to fold in on themselves. Because down there, halfway between forest and sky, is a cave, a shallow one. More of an overhang, a windbreak. But it's been painted. You scramble down shoes, slipping on loose shale, heart banging harder than it needs to. When you arrive, you stop cold. There are figures, white pigment faded, painted by someone with fingers as wide as yours maybe. Shapes of mammoths, long tusks, swaying trunks. But beside them, owl shapes, large, eyeless, just the outline, arched wings, hunched posture. Silent witnesses next to the giants. And then one more detail, a figure between them, smaller. Neither mammoth nor bird, just a pair of eyes. Yours, maybe, or maybe something older, something that saw both. You sit, not because you're tired, because standing feels arrogant. You've entered the part of the story where the scholars stop speaking and the whispers begin. This is where the citations dry up and the perhaps and possibly and one interpretation phrases take over. This is where we ask, was the giant owl even real? Historians still debate whether the so-called mourning owl existed as a distinct species, or was just a cultural ghost pieced together from footprints, bones, and the hallucinations of exhausted mammoth hunters. The fossil record is maddeningly vague. Large owl bones exist, yes, some with wingspans beyond modern records, but nothing definitive, nothing complete. And yet the art persists. From Scandinavia to the Altai Mountains, to limestone outcrops in what is now northern Turkey, traces of owl-elephant pairings appear in cave etchings and burial adornments, sometimes drawn together, sometimes mirrored, sometimes joined by that third symbol, a spiral, or a feather, or a pair of footprints walking in parallel. The academic consensus shrugs and squints. Odd fact. The largest known extinct owl, Ornithomegalonyx from prehistoric Cuba, stood over a meter tall and may have weighed up to 10 kilograms. But it was flightless, a hunter, nothing like what you've seen. But it proves the body was possible. The myth didn't need wings to stand, and yet, the myths give it wings. You walk deeper into the overhang and find something strange pressed into the dirt, a stone carved not with precision, but with intention. A ring, etched lines circling an indentation. Crude, but unmistakable. Someone marked this place as sacred, not for the mammoths, not for the owls, but for the relationship between them, and maybe for the thing that watched them both. You, joke time, because you've been sitting in owl-elephant mystery stew for too long, and your brain's starting to wrinkle. Pretty soon, we'll find a cave painting of an owl giving an elephant a therapy session. Plot twist. The owls were just massive introverts, and the mammoths respected the vibe. Anthropologists be like, we don't know what this means, but it feels emotionally loaded, so publish. Back outside, you lean against the rock and stare into the clouds. The sky is heavy with birds, none of them owls. Daytime doesn't favor them. But you know they're nearby, watching as always from the tree line. Behind the veil of noise and daylight, you remember one old field note from a 19th century naturalist who camped too close to a mammoth grave. He reported a great bird of silence that circled but never landed. His peers dismissed it as dream fever. You're starting to think maybe it was a visit. The valley below is littered with grave sites. Not arranged like human cemeteries, but purposeful nonetheless. Clusters of bones, marks in the earth, stones around skulls, and always the signs of presence. Feathers, owl droppings, footprints where no owl should walk. And every time someone tries to categorize this to pin it down as a quirk of scavenging or nesting behavior, the same questions arise. Why return year after year? Why no feeding? Why this quiet choreography of arrival, waiting, and departure? Some theories now propose that elephants invented the owl. Not biologically, of course, but symbolically. That over thousands of years of coincidental presence, the owl became meaning. A signal. A signpost for memory. And from there, a myth. A feathered ghost who always arrives when death is near. And if that's true, if the mammoths created the mourning owl in their minds, passed it through behavior mimicry and unspoken belief, then what you've been seeing all along might not be a species at all. It might be a story, one that remembers itself through movement, silence, and shadow. You stand at the cave mouth watching the wind carry dust across the ancient drawings. The owl beside the mammoth. The watcher beside the one who knows it's time. You're not sure which is more real anymore, and you're not sure it matters. You find the tusk at sunset. It shouldn't be there, not this far from the valley, not this clean, not this wrapped. But there it is, half buried in shale, still catching the last rays of gold like a sleeping lighthouse. You crouch beside it, fingers hesitant. The shape is unmistakable, curved, pale, heavy with memory. But what shocks you isn't the bone itself. It's what's wound around it. Feathers, twine made of braided grass, tufts of ancient down. Owl feathers unmistakably, but placed with intention, bound along the length like ceremonial beads. Not just stuck, arranged. Some are braided with strips of mammoth hair. Others dangle loosely as if meant to drift in the wind. It looks like an offering, or a warning, or something between art and apology. You reach out, but you pause hovering just above it. Not because you're afraid it will bite, but because it feels sacred. Not religious in a way humans would recognize, but something rawer, older. The twine is fragile. One touch might crumble it, but part of you suspects the message doesn't need preserving in pieces. It's already preserved in pattern. You walk a slow circle around the tusk. The grass here is stunted, flattened in a familiar way by wide feet repeatedly pacing. You recognize the same semicircular press as the ones near the stone rings. And in the dirt, claw prints. 3 toes. Of course, you're standing in a meeting place where elephant and owl behaviors met in gesture. This was no accident. Historians still debate whether elephants decorated their dead. Most assume it's projection. They note that elephant trunks are strong, but not precise, good for lifting, not for weaving. But the fossil record has delivered anomalies: tusks, stained with crushed berries, bones with fibers wrapped tightly around them. Dismissed as natural entanglement. Every time. But you've seen too many now. Too many objects wrapped, arranged, repeated. And always the owl feathers. Odd fact: feathers decompose slowly. In oxygen-poor environments, they can remain intact for hundreds of years. Archaeologists have found entire fans of them preserved beneath collapsed burial mounds. Their shape endures long after the body is dust. You finally kneel, resting one hand on the shale near the base of the tusk. It's cold, but not dead. Because what you're touching isn't just fossil or ritual, it's communication. Someone placed these feathers not for show, not for beauty, but to say something. You look up and realize you're not alone. On the ridge above, half lost in shadow, stands a single elephant. Old, tall, one tusk broken. It doesn't move. Behind it, on a low branch, an owl. Neither reacts to your presence. You are not the subject of this moment. You are the intruder. The elephant turns slightly, just enough to show its flank. And hanging from its ear, a feather, bound with grass, dangling like an earring or a charm. The owl tilts its head. The elephant lowers his. And they stay that way for minutes, maybe longer. You wonder if they remember the same individual. If this is mourning or tribute, or simply the continuation of a gesture no one dares interrupt. Joke break, because your breath is hitching in your chest and your human brain needs something to hold on to. And here we have the first known example of elephant jewelry. Natural. Ethical. Owl approved. Honestly, if I die and a bird and an elephant team up to decorate my bones, I'll feel honored. Coming soon, trunk and feather. A cross-species Etsy store for tasteful mourning decor. But you're not laughing, not really. You're watching a behavior that no textbook can name. Not grief, not reverence, not entirely mimicry. Something more complicated. A mammoth once fell here. You can feel it in the hush. And something or someones kept returning, adding, touching, wrapping, remembering. And now these gestures have become symbols. Bound feathers, fringed tusks, a decorated stillness that says, I knew you, I will return. You sit in the dirt until the light fails. The owl doesn't leave. The elephant doesn't step forward. But something has shifted. They have made a message in materials. And by witnessing it, you've joined the chain. Not the first link. Not the last. Just one more mammal who didn't ask to be part of the ritual, but stayed anyway. You've been tracking the herd for days, expecting signs of the usual shallow grave depressions, scattered stones, the faint crescent of owl feathers half buried in sand. But this place confuses you. Because there is a grave. It's clear. A neat oval hollow in the earth. The kind shaped by enormous weight pressing down repeatedly, then lifted with care. There's even a circle of disturbed moss elephant footprints, faded deliberate. And at the center, arranged twigs, brittle owl feathers fanned like a crown, a jawbone from some unidentifiable beast placed just slightly askew like a half-remembered sentence. All of it screams elephant burial. Except there's no elephant, no bones, no tusks, no hair, just the shape of the act. A ritual with nothing inside it. A body that never came. You walk around the ring, half expecting to fall through a sinkhole or discover some fossil tucked just beneath the surface. But no, you dig with your fingers. You brush away centuries of leaves. Nothing. The grave is empty. And now your brain's working overtime. Was it a mistake? A practice burial? Did an elephant prepare the place for a dying companion only for the companion to recover or die somewhere else? Or was this for something else entirely? You find more signs nearby. Owl pellets under a high stone ledge, smooth spots where feathers rested against bark, and faint claw marks around the rim of the empty grave. Owl activity. But if the owls prepared this spot or even maintained it, what were they waiting for? Who or what was this grave meant to receive? Historians still debate whether non-humans are capable of preparing symbolic spaces in anticipation of death rather than in response to it. Most dismiss it outright. That's too close to prophecy, too unsettling for a scientific conference. But others quietly, carefully, are beginning to suggest that some species seem to expect the return of the dead. That ritual might sometimes come before loss, not to mark it, but to summon it. Odd fact. In some indigenous cultures, temporary graves or spirit beds were made for souls yet to depart, or for beings that had no body to bury only the weight of memory. They were offerings to absence. You start to wonder, did the elephants do this for themselves? Did they build this grave not because someone had died, but because someone had not yet? Or worse, because someone would never return? Joke time, because you're standing at an empty grave built by unknown creatures, and the emotional weight is making your spine buzz. This is either grief of performance art or prehistoric existentialism. Honestly, all three. Imagine digging your own grave as a love letter to someone who never arrives. Peak drama. Somewhere a mammoth is like, "This is my plot, and I'm just saving it for later." You lie down beside the grave, head resting against a stone polished smooth by something big, something with weight. You close your eyes and try to imagine it. An elephant comes here alone. The herd is far behind. It walks the circle, steps into the hollow, pauses, doesn't lie down, just stands there, then walks out again. Another returns days later, owl feathers and trunk, drops them in the center, leaves. Over time, the spot fills with meaning, with gestures, with readiness. And then, nothing. Nobody ever came. But the ritual remains. You've started seeing more of these false graves as you travel, scattered across the landscape, like punctuation marks in an unfinished story. Some more elaborate than others, some with fruit, some with twigs arranged in spirals, some with nothing at all. It's not always clear who built them, but the pattern is growing, and it makes you wonder what happens when a ritual outlives the thing it was created for. Do elephants still return to these spaces even if they no longer know why? Do owls still perch above them guarding invisible souls? Is it possible that this entire ghost-laced choreography was meant for someone who never existed in the first place? Or someone who left no bones? A myth? A shadow? A feeling? You sit up brushing dirt from your palms. The wind shifts. You hear a hoot not close but not far, and behind it the low thunder of distant feet. A herd is passing by. None of them stop. None of them look at the grave. But their path bends ever so slightly, just enough to skirt the space. Not avoidance, respect, as if they too know this place holds nothing and everything. A place made for a body that never arrived. A memory of someone never named, and still someone built it. Because some part of them refused to let go of the idea that the dead should be honored, even if they never showed up. You return to the beginning. Not the physical place, not the basin with the first bones you found, not the frozen hillside where the owl stared down into a calf's eyes. You return to something deeper. An idea. A soundless thread woven through thousands of years and too many footprints to count. You return to the quiet. And what you find there is strange, because by now you know the rituals. You've seen the feathers laid on tusks, the rings of stone, the owl perched like punctuation over death. You've seen offerings, mimicry that became offering, and stillness that outlasts memory. But here, you watch an elephant stand perfectly still beside the body of another, and she does nothing. No feather, no circle, no gift. Just stands, and then leaves, and hours later another arrives, and he does the same, and the body untouched, not mourned with gesture, not wrapped in ritual, but never ever alone. You stay longer than you should, days maybe, long enough to watch 4 more arrive, long enough to watch the bones begin to sink into the earth unmarked but witnessed, and each visitor brings nothing but presents. And somehow that feels like the most ancient offering of all. You think about how it started, if it started at all. About the first time an elephant saw an owl unmoving in a tree above the dead. How it watched, learned, mimicked, maybe even misunderstood, but kept coming back. And maybe that's the point. That the power of ritual isn't in what it does, but in the insistence of doing it again, even when no one's sure why. even when no one's watching, even when the one being mourned is long gone or never existed. Historians still debate whether elephants grieve or simply reenact learned behaviors, whether owls perched from practicality or instinct. Whether this entire imagined convergence is just a long, elegant coincidence. But out here among these circles, these shadows, these quiet repetitions, coincidence begins to look suspiciously like culture. Odd fact. In some remote parts of Sumatra, elephant tracks have been found circling the graves of humans. No clear connection, no history of contact, just prints, round and slow, pressed gently into the mud like a question that answers itself. You stand at the edge of the clearing and realize something with quiet certainty. It never mattered who taught whom. Not the feathers, not the stillness, not even the death. What mattered was the return, the instinct to witness, to pause, to behave like something was worth remembering. You think of owls roosting over mammoths, mammoths carrying feathers in their trunks. You think of caves with paintings of birds beside beasts. You think of the grave that had no elephant. And now, a moment of silence with no performance, no symbol, just you. You blink. There's an owl in the tree above you. Its head turns slowly. You're not startled. You just nod. And it does not nod back. But you both understand something now. Ritual is not a thing we create. It's a thing that lives in the space between what we forget and what we repeat anyway. And maybe, just maybe, the elephants still grieve, not because they remember the dead, but because they remember the grieving. Even when they don't know who died. Even when they don't know why it matters. Even when it's just a feeling, an old echo passed down through bones and silence and wing beats. You walk away finally, not because the moment has ended, but because the ritual will continue without you. And you don't need to see it again to know it's real. You hear nothing behind you. But you know it's still there. The owl, the bones, the elephant who hasn't arrived yet, all waiting, all remembering something they never truly learned. You've just journeyed through a world where ritual didn't begin with humans, where the quiet spaces between predator and prey were filled with something older than instinct remembrance. Across 15 immersive sections, you followed a speculative trail of silent watchers, giant owls perched at the edge of elephant death. What began as simple presence became patterned: the stillness, the feather offerings, the rings of stone, the repeated visits to graves long emptied of bodies. Mammoths learned to pause. Owls learned to return. And between them, a rhythm formed. This story wasn't about one species teaching the other. It wasn't about myth or metaphor or proving consciousness. It was about the strange gravity of grief, the idea that, even without language, creatures might feel compelled to bear witness. In one section, a mammoth calf freezes beneath the silhouette of owl wings. In another, owls walk circles around a fallen tusk. In the forest, with no echo sound, dies so that memory can live. Each scene layers on the quiet question, what if memory is contagious? And perhaps the most haunting idea of all, that some graves hold no dead. That elephants still grieve for someone they can't name, following rituals they didn't invent, echoing shadows shaped like feathers and stillness. So, the next time you see a bird watching you too long, or hear silence that seems a little too heavy, remember. Some stories are older than language. Some rituals need no origin. And some mourning never ends, it just gets quieter.